Part of the program. Before we do that, I just want to thank the Eastern Alpine Fire for arranging for the food. Give them a hand, please. Okay, we now have a series of 5-minute presentations by various agencies that will be involved when the fire comes, and when we're going to hold questions until they're done, and then we can have another few questions from the public. First up is Rick Stevens, Sheriff Rick Stevens.
Good evening. Wasn't that a nice presentation that we brought in there? I mean, Corey does a really good job. I mean, I'm really proud of him. I also want to thank Bruno. Where's Bruno? Stick out. Mike, Sylvia. The food was awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's important to me for tonight, right? Good job. All right. Everything I was going to talk about, Corey covered, of course. So anyway, we're going to start just with a brief overview of what an evacuation would consist of. It has 3 aspects. It's an advisory level. And that's something I did on the Washington fire. So it's a level that I know the fire's coming. I got 2 days, 1 day, something like that. So I'll put an advisory out. I did that in the Washington fire because we knew, I was talking to Mike, that Wildy, wherever he's at, hiding around here someplace. Oh, he's there back there. He gave us a briefing that said, hey guys, tomorrow it's going to be ugly. We're expecting high winds and it's going to be bad. So I put that advisory out. Todd, wherever Todd's in here, he moved half his house out. That is what we want you guys to do. Move your house out, pack your bags, get out. If you don't have a reason to stay there, leave. And that's what I think the whole mission here tonight is to take ownership and responsibility. And so the waterfall fire went absolutely perfect. We had a small little evacuation out at Carson River Resort. We didn't lose any structures. Everybody was safe. We never got to the mandatory section because there's trigger points for me to do that. The trigger point was up on Port Boy Ridge. You know, I was personally standing on that ridge with the firefighters, with the shovel, making sure I knew exactly when it was going to crest that ridge, if it did crest that ridge. We had some intel from the old days that, you know, the wind would come down the canyon and kind of push it back towards Maunder. So we knew, you know, if it held it there, that it was more than likely going to do it. That's exactly what happened. So that's what happened on that big fire. It's 18,000 acres. It burned most of that in 1 day. So that was our last big incident. The other incident that we've had over the years, we had the Hungalalti fire last year. That's a different type of evacuation. That literally we had to evacuate in 45 minutes. They evacuated the whole community. Our biggest problem with that evacuation was people speeding because they're in a panic situation. We want you to stay calm. We want you to think. We want you to stay cool. Even in that, you know, stressful situation where it's, you know, really quick, think. Take your time and you'll be fine. Just stay calm. That is the best advice I can give you. Like Corey did on his little presentation up there with the, you know, telling you that he can't guarantee your safety. Absolutely not. We can't guarantee your safety. But you have your best chance when you stay calm, cool, and collected. I know when these stressful situations, because I'm a fireman, I've been going these fires, it seems like everything slows down when I'm in the firestorm. It's just, things slow down, I start thinking. It's very clear. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it, but if you can have that calmness, it's perfect. You can think, guys panic. I remember we were on the fire, I think it was Wildy could probably say it was the one in Carson. But anyway, I was on one of the strike teams that was in that fire, and the subdivision got burned over. The safety officer is driving through the subdivision, I'll still remember this, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, run for your lives, run for your lives. And this is the fireman. And I'm just like, that's the worst. And these guys are driving their fire trucks this way and that way, and I'm trying to run over. And I'm like, stop. You're in a subdivision. We're fine. Just stay cool. It'll burn over us, and then we'll put the houses out. And then we were the only strike team that stayed there. All the rest of them ran, and then we put out all the houses after the fire passed. You know, as long as you stay calm, cool, and collected, you know, usually it works out. Not always, but most of the time. The other thing that, you know, we've been talking about fires. We have other disasters here. I've had 2 hazmat spills. One on Highway 4 about 15, 20 years ago, closed the road for 2 days. And then last year we had that one at Woodford's. When we go to do those evacuations, it's a different situation too. You know, you don't need to bring all your valuables and all this kind. You need your car keys, whatever drugs you need for the day, and leave. I mean, you have to get out because you're gonna breathe it in. It's gonna kill you. It's poison. We don't know what it is. We all have these little handbooks. We read the placard card on the handbook. It tells us, okay, this chemical says half mile. That's what I go by. So I draw a circle on the map, a half mile. Then I go, that's the hot zone. Then I have a warm zone, might be 3/4 of a mile. And then we have a cold zone. So that's what I do that guides me into my evacuation decision. So we evacuate immediately. I followed that book, even though we knew, okay, probably this chemical's not that bad. And for me, it was getting the phone calls, when can we come back? When can we come back? Well, you're not gonna come back till the hazmat team shows up and tells me it's okay. That took a long time. I have my EOC that we have opened up 3 of them, I think, in the last 4 years. And that's our Emergency Operations Center. And what that does, that is where all my coordination comes when I get to my Red Cross people, when I go for, my resources. And so I kept running in there every hour. Nicole was there and complaining and bitching. I'm like, where's my hazmat team? Where's my resources? My citizens want to get back in their houses. I take it 100% seriously. Your safety is my #1 priority, followed by your property and so on. But your safety and the citizen safety and our tourists that come here are my primary concern, always. And so if I got to keep you out of your house 7, 8 hours because I'm waiting on a hazmat team, that's what I'm going to do. So that was on that one. And then we can talk about all of our mutual aid. I have a great relationship with all of our surrounding counties, El Dorado, Douglas, Mono, Amador, Tuolumne, Calaveras. And anytime I need law enforcement assistance, these guys are there in a blink of an eye. Since we don't have a lot of time, I won't go into all the pre-evacuation stuff because I think they pretty much covered that and all that. And that's about all I have. We'll take some questions at the end. But I just want everybody to understand that in the last 5 years, I have been through 5 major disasters here, where Johnny, the previous sheriff, in 12 years had none. So he didn't even know what an EOC was. So we've been going through, we have a great working relationship with OES. He hasn't even had a major search that I've had in the last 5 years. So we work with our state and federal partners because we have to, and we've been involved in a lot of major incidents over the last years, which has been a very good educational tool. The EOC, we've opened up, like I said, 1 a year, and we never even knew what that was 5 years ago. So I want everybody to take away that we do know what we're doing. Sometimes, like the gentleman said, he's been here and hasn't really understand what the plan is. You gotta have ownership. You've gotta be able to make that plan yourself, because if I can't get to you, or I can't, reach you, you gotta be able to take care of yourself. We all grew up here, we knew, okay, there's a meadow over there, I can go stand in that meadow. That's what you gotta do. Hike around your areas, learn your surroundings, so you know if I'm off on Hot Springs, the fire's between Markleyville and Hot Springs, and it's a north wind blowing up, okay, I know I can't get to Markleyville, the fire's got the road blocked, I'm gonna either go over here to Grover's to the big meadow, or I'm gonna go over here to Pleasant Valley to the big meadow, or I might go into Fritz's, meadow up there by Nani's house. So, you just gotta pick and choose, like they were showing you on that thing, where are you gonna go? It all relies on you. Most of our county does not have that situation. You see the fire, and the Mesa is a perfect example. You can see the fire coming a mile away, and you just like, well, I'm gonna turn, I'm gonna go to Garden. That's the evacuation route. Or if it's going the other way, which is very rare, I'm gonna turn and go to the lake. But that's easy. Bear Valley, we have floods. It's a little different situation, but it's the same thing. One way out, right or left, and that's what you do. But you have all that in your mind, what you're gonna do ahead of time, because I will be trying to knock on your door, but if I can't, you've gotta be able to take care of yourself and be self-sufficient. And most of you are. Y'all know that. Y'all lived here longer than me, 50 years. So anyway, I'll pass it on. We'll let the fire guys talk a little bit now.
Thank you, Rick. Fire Chief Terry Hughes.
It's real hard to come up here after Rick and Christian, so it's basically what Rick and I do is we work together on everything we go on. We've had 5 major disasters. You have, to do a little history, you have 24 volunteers. Out of those 24 volunteers, probably 18 very active. We try to get them they've been up to Tahoe training with the Zephyr crew. We have a real active training program with CAL FIRE every Wednesday night. They come down. We train with the Forest Service, and we have mutual aid agreements in writing now with all the agencies around us. We have mutual aid agreement with Lake Valley. We have mutual aid agreements with East Fork Fire. We have what is known as a automatic threat zone, and that means that East Fork's going to come all the way up to Upper Ribbon Trail, just like it's their district. So if we break a fire and it threatens their property, they go ahead and send as much help as we need. That's where mainly you get all your main water tenders out of. East Fork has 11 water tenders that we can call up and start responding this way. So if we do have a fire on the Mesa area, we average about 15,000 gallons of water being put on the road with water tenders and engines coming in. We're part of the Lake Tahoe Regional Chiefs Association, and what that is means we can call up for strike teams. 5 engines will come down here for 72 hours at no cost to the residents of Alpine County. The only thing is that when they call us for the engine, we have to send engines. We've sent water tenders all the way to the top of Becco on a structure fire a few months ago. We do a lot of mutual aid to Lake Valley. So it's a real close, tight network. When I'm out of town, you have another chief that will be on call when I'm gone. We'll be picking up one more chief in August, so you'll have a chief officer around at all times. And what that person does is he pushes the button to bring in help. And that's the main thing. Our philosophy is send a lot of help, and if we don't need them, send them home. Cal Fire, Forest Service, Rick, we all know when people are around or not to pull that plug to get them on the road. So pretty much that's where we're at. We have 3 paramedics from South Lake Tahoe Fire on the staff. We have EMTs, we have retired South Tahoe captain. So we have a variety of people. But that's pretty much the sum. The evacuation basically is when we break the call, Rick and I in communications right away. On the Colony Fire, Chief Wilden and I were talking on the telephone before we even got to the fire. So we're pulling the plug as fast as we can because we're isolated here and we try to get the resources here as fast as possible. That's pretty much where we're at. Okay?
Thank you. Ron Sagan, where did you go? There. Ron Sagan will introduce himself, but he's in charge of the Douglas County 911 and emergency service, reception, I guess it's called. And when our sheriff's department is closed, this is where the calls go.
So, good evening. My name is Ron Sagan. I'm the Emergency Services Director for Douglas County. Also, your 911 center that Alpine County uses. We are the 24/7 911 answering point for all the residents in Alpine County. There's nothing more I can say what the sheriff from Butte County said about 911. That is spot on. It validated every single concern that I have. I'm fortunate I've not experienced a disaster of their caliber, but I've been through enough in my career that can happen in an instant. We take an accident on 395 and our 911 system is inundated. Same thing happens on the Washington fire here. Same thing happened on the hazmat on Highway 88. In just a second here, we're going to test the system to see how the wireless emergency alert will work. So hopefully in just a few seconds or so that we're going to get a wireless alert, or we're not. So that's going to be where that technology comes into play. Did it already? Okay. So this is, it should
Make
it
sure
should
you
be.
don't tell anybody because we're not supposed to be doing this.
There is an FCC police, and that's why Chris signed in instead of me. So appreciate that. It's Alpine County's fault. So this is this is stressing a point. We should have, somebody in this room should have received an alert by now. I'm on Verizon on my work phone. I'm on AT&T on my personal phone, which AT&T does not exist in pretty much all of Alpine County. So this is just a reiteration of how does 911 tell you if there's an emergency. There's only one other, there's two other ways actually. The other primary way is we do a reverse, we call you, either on your cell phone or on your home phone. If to do that, you have to be registered in the reverse 911 system. We use West Alert, it's a reverse 911. Same thing as what Code Red does in Butte County, but you have to register. Do it now. If you haven't done so, do it now. Chris has graciously volunteered. She's trained. She knows how to use the system. She's volunteered to, if you don't have access to a computer, or if you don't want to, contact Chris. She will do it for you. That's how important it is. That's how important that the sheriff's taken this, that we need to get you in the system. Yes, ma'am.
Where do you register? I mean, do you register online?
Absolutely. It's a self-registration, and it's a secure website, so you make sure you put the HTTPS, so it's secure, but it's really simple. It's DouglasCountyOnTheAlert.com. I'm sorry we couldn't add Alpine County in that string. DouglasCountyOnTheAlert.com.
So is that, I mean, raise your hands if you're on Nextdoor. Those of you not on Nextdoor, you need to get on Nextdoor. Can that go out on Nextdoor?
No.
Why?
No, we don't have access to that. And
Wait,
okay, and I've got to hold the questions for the chairman. I have to. So.
No, I just mean to get the information for signing up. Okay, somebody who has Nextdoor, will you post it?
I can answer this question.
Okay, the chairman's asked that we don't do questions right now, but Chris will answer that for you after the meeting. So, so registering for the reverse 911 is your other alternative. The third and final is called the emergency alert system, which interrupts commercial broadcasting and telephone. We are still battling with the FCC on getting access to the West Slope. Still do not have access to the West Slope, so we are working diligently in trying to get that. That, of course, you have to have your TV on or your commercial radio in your car. But that's how we would contact you. So it's limited. And as you see, it's the technology. It didn't work. It didn't work. Now, is it going to work in Markleeville? Is it going to work on the Mesa? I don't know. So it's a good example.
You were sending out, or was
Yes, yes, a wireless emergency alert.
Okay.
Yep. There's no sign up for that. If you have a modern cell phone, you should have gotten it. I should have gotten it on there, but you don't. Again, that just reiterates the importance of that. Self-preparedness. We, from the 911 Emergency Services Department, are not going to always have the ability to call you and tell you that there's a problem. So that's, again, it's self-preparedness. So I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. For those of you that are not signed up to Reverse 911, go to the county website and the sheriff's page. I believe there's a link, and you can do it that way. Chris Anthony of CAL FIRE. Nope, here he is. Chris has been a great help to the community over the years. He participates, he supports us. It's great to have him here.
So thank you so much for having me here tonight, and thank you so much for sticking around after dinner and after what was just an excellent presentation earlier. So really briefly, what I want to try to do is I want to set some context. And so if you could go to the next slide. So one of the things that I want to try to do is provide a historical perspective on kind of where we're at statewide. Because the Camp Fire, unfortunately, although it was the most deadly and most destructive fire in the state's history, unfortunately, it's not a unique occurrence anymore. So if you could just hit the space bar for me. So just in the last 2 years, we've actually had 4 out of 20 of the largest fires in the state's history. And then we've had 15, which should be the next number that pops up, 15 out of 20 of the largest fires in the state's history just since the year 2000. And keeping in mind, we have records that date back to 1932 that are fairly accurate in terms of how many acres have been burned, how many structures have been destroyed, and how many lives have been lost. So clearly something is changing. If you can go to the next slide. Just go ahead and click through it there. So we've had 7 of the most destructive fires in just the last 21 months. And those are measured by, and that's 7 out of 20. Those are measured by the number of structures that are destroyed. And that's really remarkable to think about, dating back to 1932, that we're seeing a level of destruction that we just simply haven't seen before with these wildland fires. You can go to the next one. And then lastly, 5 of the most deadly just since 2017. That's 5 out of 20. Now keep in mind, our mutual aid system and the type of equipment that we have and the amount of equipment that we have and the aircraft that we have and the systems that we have in place are so much better than they were back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So what we're seeing with these fires is they're really outpacing our ability to control them. And hence, this is why we're seeing this level of destruction, the number of acres that are burned, and the number of fatalities going up on these fires. Because for me, on some of these fires, the word that just keeps on coming back to mind is incineration. I'm seeing incineration. I'm seeing things burn in ways that I simply haven't seen them burn before. If you can go to the next slide, please. So in 2017, as most of you know, we had all the fires down in Napa Valley, in the wine country, Sonoma. It seemed kind of unrepeatable. We had Coffee Park that burned up. Tubbs at the time was the most destructive fire in the state's history. When I left there, I was thinking, wow, I'm probably not going to ever see anything like that again. How could something like that happen again? And then weeks later, we had the Thomas Fire, which became the state's largest fire in its history down in Ventura, and then burned up into Santa Barbara County. And then, as many of you may know, we had the floods that occurred and the debris flows in Montecito immediately following the fire down in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. But that year, we had 10,922 structures destroyed. It was just unheard of. Next slide, please. And then in 2018, obviously, if you just can click 4 times for me, we had another, what I thought was unrepeatable. Unfortunately, it wasn't. We had the Car Fire. We saw things on the Car Fire that we hadn't seen before. We saw marinas completely destroyed, boats that were surrounded by water, lots of defensible space for a boat, right? We saw a fire tornado that was rated at an EF3 strength, 136 to 165 miles an hour. It was 1,000 feet at its base. We'd never seen anything like that before. It was the largest recorded tornado in California's history that was caused by a fire. Killed a firefighter. And then Mendocino Complex. So, I thought Thomas would kind of stand the test of time, right? It was, I think, 281,000 acres. And then we had the Mendocino Complex, 459,000 acres, started literally days after the Car Fire started up in Redding. And then, so, gosh, it can't get any worse than that, right? And then on November 8th, we had the Camp Fire that started. But we also had another fire that started on November 8th as well. And that was the Woolsey Fire, which, as most of you may remember, started actually kind of near Simi Valley, burned through Thousand Oaks, Calabasas, through the Santa Monica National Recreation Area, down into Malibu and Point Dume, okay? Very, 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 very fast-moving fire on the same day. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is, even though we're really focused in on camp, when we start getting multiple fires burning in the state, there's a real resource drawdown that occurs. And I can tell you that in Southern California, there's probably nowhere else in this world that has more resources than Southern California. When I was being interviewed by Fox News and they asked me, so why, when I was down in Woolsey, because I went down there, they're like, why are so many more people killed up on camp than down here on Woolsey? And I hadn't really thought about it, but it's really the transportation system. The systems in Southern California, those transportation systems can literally move millions of people in a day. They have more resources for media, lots of helicopters that are providing just real-time intelligence to people so they know exactly what's going on, where the fire is burning. Incredible technology down there. Campfire, obviously, a very different story in terms of being able to get down Skyway, get out of that community in a timely fashion. It just wasn't gonna happen. So next slide, please. This is a video. I don't know if you can play it or not. If not, it's not a big deal. But one of the things that I just wanted to mention is that we as firefighters and law enforcement agencies, first responders, we're in a different environment now. It's, we call it wildland fire, but these are wildland fires now. This is the Carr Fire. This is Lake Redding, which is right along the Sacramento River. Beautiful neighborhood. It's like hardly even wildland. But these are the conditions that our firefighters are now working in, and law enforcement agencies. And basically all we're trying to do is just stop it from progressing to that next house and getting people out of the way. And so it's a different world for us now in terms of what we're doing and what we're trying to protect in the environment that we're in. So if you can go to the next one, please. So why? There's a lot of questions about why is this happening. So our fire seasons are longer, up to 78 days in the western United States than just 4 decades ago. So that obviously plays a huge factor into it. Our temperatures are warming. Our climate is changing, which affects the type of weather that we see on these fires, including the way that fires burn at night, because our temperatures don't drop quite as much and our humidities don't go up like they normally do. So the vegetation's obviously just more receptive to ignition, and normally it's a great time for us to get control on these fires, and when this happens, we can't. It's a lot more difficult. Fire exclusion over 100 years, we've been so good at putting out fire that we've taken that natural fire return cycle out of the environment. So that's why we're talking about prescribed fire and trying to get it reintroduced into these forests where it naturally was occurring, in some cases every 3 to 7 years before fire suppression. We obviously are still on the heels of a historic drought, which has really affected the amount of dead fuels that are out on the landscape. We have unresilient landscapes that just simply cannot handle the type of events that we're seeing, whether it's fire, insects, disease. They're overstocked. Our forests are overstocked. We have too many trees per acre. They're competing with each other. It's not sustainable moving forward. And then we have legacy building codes and construction that we've talked about. So next slide. So one of the things I want to mention, we have pre-attack plans up here that go to firefighters. We did one for the Washington fire, and we'd like to update that. It's basically for first responders coming in, so we know where certain strategic items are for us. But one of the things that we did in those, Sheriff Honey called it a shelter in place. We call it temporary refuge areas, places that we could put people if we needed to in the event that you get cut off. And I think this is my last slide coming up. And a lot of this has already been talked about tonight. So and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more in the Q&A. But I just want to see if, one of the things I really want to mention is monitoring the weather. Take the time to monitor the weather. Be keyed in on fire weather watches and fire weather warnings and red flag conditions and things like that, so that yeah, this is not a good day. I need to be prepared to go in the event that something happens. Many of us in the fire service here, we're gone during the summer, and so we're making those calls back to our wives or significant others saying, hey, just be ready to go. Today could not be a good day in Alpine County or in Tahoe. So with that, thank you very much for having me here tonight, and I know we'll have some time for questions later.
Thank you, Chris. Mike Wilde, U.S. Forest Service. Mike's been working here in Alpine County longer than some people have lived here.
Not quite. There's a few of you who've been around here longer than me. But I am a fire management officer for the Carson Ranger District for the Forest Service. I did work down here in Alpine County for quite a while. 1988 after the Acorn Fire, all the way until the 2000s when I moved back up to the Carson City office. So unfortunately, you drive up and down the front here, when I talk about the front, up and down 395, and almost every fire scar you can see out there, I have an intimate relationship with it. We've been successful on many of them. And when I call success, I'm talking about loss of life. That's our primary concern. And what these folks gave you that information from Butte County, please take it to heart. I need your help. All of us in the fire service need your help to make sure you can live with fire, because it will return. This is all burnt at one time or another in history, and it will burn again, and you're living in it. So I need your help to not expose emergency responders to get them in a place where they're gonna get hurt. So when they talk about place of refuge, I call them safety zones, because that's what we talk about in fire, a place where you can survive while the fire burns around you. Like they talked about, identify those places in here. CAL FIRE, used to be CDF, I'm going way back in the old days. But when they put together that stuff after the Washington fire, it identified some safety zones, place of refuge, shelter in place, the meadows. If they're brown, don't try to shelter up in those, okay? Stay aware of what the conditions are. Stay aware of what the fuel types are. Don't work on slideshows because the meadows are green right now. Because when we get the next drought and they're brown, that might not be a very comfortable place to hang out. Okay? What drives most of the fires, what you'll be concerned with around here, is brush. How many lived through the Acorn Fire here? Very fast moving. What time of day did that thing come off the hill? About 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Remember that. Every afternoon we get afternoon zephyrs at 2 o'clock because of the thermal heating out in the desert draws this cooler air down across here. You mix that in with a cold front that's coming through and your winds hit 40 miles an hour. How do you know a cold front's coming through? What just happened? Just here in the last 4 days. Cold front came through, didn't it? How do you know a cold front came through besides watching the weatherman? Well, there was wind that comes with the cold front, but what really happened? This is natural. You guys will know this. Temperature drop. You're right on it. You see a 20-degree temperature swing? You're going to get a bunch of wind, right? You mix that in, throw that into the fire behavior, what's going to happen? You're going to have very fast moving fire in the brush. Will you be able to outrun it? Can you run 300 yards in a second? No. Watch those indicators out there. We all do in fire. Don't be surprised. Because something is going to cause an ignition source out there. Maybe the power lines, maybe, who knows what. In the wrong place at the wrong time. And there's nothing we as a fire service can do about it. When Rick talked about the Washington fire, when Paul Washington and I were standing up on top of Silver Hill, that fire at that time was about 500 acres, burning on the side of Silver Peak in extreme drought conditions. Was there anything we could do with it? Absolutely nothing. What'd we do? Called Rick to come up with meeting us. Let's shut down Highway 4, let's shut down Monitor, let's close 88, 89, somewhere around East Fork Resort. Get everybody out of its way. And don't expose anybody to that threat. And we shut those down, get everybody out, we close the roads, we know nobody else is coming in there. So we've erased that human threat, which is my primary concern, both on the emergency responders and the public. But what they talked about here, Tim, are you gonna talk?
I'm last.
No, Mr. Rhodey. So Tim's currently an IC, an incident commander on a Great Basin overhead team, incident management team. I was for about 7 years. We travel all around the nation trying to bring order to the chaos. We usually get there after that initial attack when the bad stuff's really happened. That's the way it used to be. Now those cycles continue. There are 14 days on a fire, don't they, Tim? And you see 5,000, 10,000 acre movement on a fire in one day. That has changed, like Chris Anthony talked about in his slides. Something has changed out here. That didn't happen when I came to work here. As a matter of fact, the Washington fire is the largest fire that's ever occurred here. I have those records going back to the turn of the century. There was one back in the 30s or 40s, when was it, Charlie? That came down out of Monitor and tracked the same way. Fire burns because of topography and weather and other factors. Unfortunately, the same footprints over and over and over again. Okay? Will the mesa burn again? Yes, it will. Let's be prepared for it. Let's learn how to live in a fire-adapted community. There's a website that you can go to if you need some help. It's called Living with Fire. How many are aware of that? Good. We started that back in the 90s to help people how to plant around their house, how to put defensible space in, and live with fire. I live in sagebrush. Will I survive? I hope so. But that's where I want everybody to be. The message you got from the folks from Butte County is solid and to the heart. And I hope you understood it, and I hope you do follow up with it. Because it's not if, and it's human nature to think it's not going to happen to me. It will. It's only a matter of time. Okay? Thank you.